Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe Muro. And now, here's Zoe.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the New Thought Media Network. My name is Zoe Muro, and I am delighted and honored to be your host for Choice, Your Creative Superpower, coming to you from Oakland, California, each Thursday, 12 noon Mountain Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. We are here to explore how you can wield your superpower for the greatest good and co-create a life experience that is most fulfilling. If you're coming back, it's great to see you here again. If this is your first time, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Hello, Wayne. Good to see you. So, I am a religious science practitioner with the New Thought Media Network, and I'm also a transformational coach. Both my ministry as a practitioner and my mission as a coach are to help people to live their lives to the fullest. Today, episode 56, we're going to explore the relationship between choice and service. Oh, hello, Shay. Good to see you. All right. So I want to expand a bit on the topic when I talk about service. I'm going to be speaking of being of service. I actually prefer saying of service to saying in service. Now, this is just a strange little semantic issue I've got. It feels to me that when I say I'm being of service, that it really captures the essence more accurately. But that's literally just my own interpretation. And I sometimes will go back and forth between the two. But in any event, I want to look at what being of service might look like, what it might entail, and what it is not. All important considerations for how we choose to serve and how that service affects our choices. For once, I'm going to dispense with dictionary definitions. I just don't feel that they provide enough of a foundational understanding to really be relevant to what we're going to be exploring here. Again, my preference. Instead, I'm going to be looking to the writings of a number of spiritual authors and speakers because being of service is a spiritual act, regardless of one's religious or philosophical perspectives. To truly be of service, we're not looking at a transaction, right? Very important. I'll do this for you, and then you'll reward me in some fashion. Nor are we saying that to be of service means forsaking one's own well-being or sacrificing to the point of utter austerity. There is no reason to think of being of service as a lessening of self. Actually, the exact opposite is true. Being of service is uplifting. It's energizing. It is a demonstration of our true spirit. That is aligning with who and whose we are. To be of service is most definitely a choice. Now, this is the idea what I was talking before about the idea of being in service. I suppose it really depends on what you're in service to, or was it something that you could accept to be in service to? Could you reject it? Because if you couldn't reject it, if it wasn't something that you were able to choose, then I don't really see that as a selfless service. I see that as a requirement. But let's make no mistake about it. We're not talking about the things you're required to do in life as being of service. Rather, I want to talk about the ways in which one chooses to connect with and lift up others. I like what Wayne Dyer has to say about this. Let me bring this up. In Manifest Your Destiny, Wayne Dyer says, service at its very basic core is an inner choice to offer a helpful and healing attitude to others, as well as to ourselves. Okay, it's very basic core. It's an inner choice to offer a helpful and healing attitude to others, as well as to ourselves. One of the most important things that I have embraced about the practice of being in service or being of service is that it's not just about the doing, the actions. It's also essentially a way of being that informs our actions and our choices. Once again, I want to turn to Wayne Dyer. Okay. It goes on to say, service is best thought of as a continual focus in your life. It is focusing on meeting all others as equals with whom we share a spiritual identity. This inner attitude of love reveals itself in action. Think about this. With whom do you share a spiritual identity? Everyone, every single human being, every creation of the one. That's quite a population, isn't it? So being able to look at your perspective, being able to look at your attitude when it comes to being of service becomes really a key point. So here's another perspective. This is from Deborah King. This is kind of a long one, so bear with me. Deborah says, it's really hard to act out love if you're miserable. And serving others while resenting the work or the people will fill you with negativity rather than love. As much as possible, shut down any self-doubt that tells you you aren't capable of doing something, and really focus on getting in touch with your true feelings about what you want to do. Okay, so there's a lot in here. There's the idea that if your perspective on being of service to someone is done begrudgingly, if it's done with a feeling of obligation, that's not selfless service. Right? And then the other aspect of it is if you find yourself thinking, oh, well, who am I to be able to do this? If you are capable, if you believe that you have something to offer, explore that by all means. All right. So we can see that choice really does play a huge part in our ability to be of selfless service because we have to choose how we're going to serve. We have to choose to serve from that place of selflessness. There's a Sanskrit word, seva or siva, depending on who's pronouncing it. And it describes these acts of selfless service, acts which are performed without regard for reward or compensation of any kind by the one providing the service. And yet, it nevertheless leads to a collective benefit, both for the person who is served and for the server alike. So, to provide selfless service, we start with a choice, of course. But how do we choose what that service will be and how we'll go about providing it? I want to point out here that while we are speaking of being selfless, it's important to recognize that when we are actively engaged in making the choice of how we'll serve, we're far more likely to be fully engaged and motivated. Give thought to the what, the when, the where, and the why of service that you'll provide. Seeing each of those factors as a choice brings about not only a greater sense of involvement, but can also lead to greater creativity and innovation as you bring your unique perspectives, experiences, and talents to the table. And make no mistake about it, folks, you are indeed unique, and you do indeed bring something that no one else can. Now, while selfless service doesn't focus on what the server receives, being able to choose how one serves does bring about a greater investment for a successful outcome. In other words, rather than thinking of it as a vested interest, which is focused on the server, it's more having an invested interest by focusing on those served. When you choose where and when you'll serve, I want you to be aware of your talents and your strengths, of course, but also, this is really important, be aware of your own limitations. Right? And I know we speak of abundance all the time, but folks, there are literal limitations. There are time constraints. There are physical capabilities. There are financial restraints, right? A whole series of things. Remember, because we have a true sense of abundance, it doesn't mean that we can simply ignore conditions and circumstances that truly exist. And if you try to do so, eventually, if not quickly, you're going to derail your efforts at service despite your best intentions. So someone asks you to help them out, and you know that you have an injury. And they say, oh, I really need you to help me lift this very heavy box. Well, yeah, you could be of service and help them, but are you literally hurting yourself? That's not being of service. Okay. Speaking of intentions, okay, because we always want to follow our best intentions whenever we serve. But speaking of intentions, bear in mind that what we intend does not always carry forward as the perceived effect. That's why it's important to be clear about not only what's needed, but also what's wanted. Okay? One of the great benefits of being in selfless service is the ability to see limitations and challenges which might never have occurred to you otherwise. And it is so very easy to overlook or take for granted all the ways that many, if not most of us, are indeed privileged. You know, Joni Mitchell sang in Big Yellow Taxi, "Don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you got till it's gone." And yes, I'm not going to sing. But of course, there are far too many people who never even had advantages that we take for granted. Nevertheless, too often we approach the idea of service with all the best intentions, and we swoop in to provide what we believe is needed, only to find that we missed the mark for any one of a number of reasons. So selfless service might mean ego-less, but it absolutely means always being mindful. Remember years ago, excuse me, watching some ridiculous TV show. A Boy Scout was helping this elderly woman across the street, and the whole way she's saying, "No, no, 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 I'm fine. Leave me alone. I'm fine." So he keeps reassuring her, "Oh, I'm only too happy to help you." They get to the other side, and she whacks him with her umbrella. And she said, "I was just waiting for a friend of mine back where I was. I didn't want to cross the street at all." So yeah, be mindful. I mean, that's a silly example, but we always want to be mindful and understand that service is about the one being served, not the server. Okay. There are, excuse me, there are a number of ways that selfless service can affect our choices going forward. All right. So we're taking into account the idea that we need to be selfless. We're taking into account the idea that we need to understand the needs of the person being served and their desire as well. Someone might have a need, but for whatever reason, they do not want it filled at this particular point in time. All right. So with that in mind, we have to be realistic here, folks. There can be a negative effect at times, right? If we fail to recognize what it is that's truly needed, our efforts don't always turn out the way we want them to, umbrella whacking included. But seriously, let's say you volunteer to work on a project for a group that you belong to. You believe in the group, you believe in the project. For some reason, it just doesn't turn out well. You don't have a particularly good experience. You might have even accomplished what the requirement was, what the task was, but it just didn't feel good. How likely are you to choose to volunteer again for that project or for that group? That choice will likely depend on the circumstance or conditions you encountered, your expectations, your perspective, and your mindset. So, before you choose to try it again, or you choose to reject a return engagement, check in with yourself. Are you accurately assessing the situation? Were you being honest with yourself? Did you approach the effort with preconceived notions for the process or preconceived notions for what the outcome would be? In short, understanding why things went poorly can help you choose more wisely, or they can help you to prepare more effectively. It's always beneficial to consider what your own part in the situation was as well as that of others. So it's not about assessing blame. It's about working towards a beneficial outcome, right? There's always the possibility that your focus was spot on. The task itself worthwhile, but personalities just didn't mesh too well. It happens, even with the best intentions and even in spiritual communities, because no matter how you look at it, every community is made up of human beings. Another potentially problematic outcome of being in service can stem from one's motivation. All right. Now, look, let's be perfectly honest about this. It feels good to be acknowledged for one's efforts. And at times, it can feel kind of bad for one's efforts to be ignored or to go unnoticed. However, if you are providing service with an expectation of reward in any form, you're potentially setting yourself up. And you're definitely losing the selfless aspect of service. I remember a really terribly stormy day, and there was this poor woman dealing with these really heavy bags and packages and such. And I helped her get to her destination safe and sound. And it felt good to be of service. So much so that I started to congratulate myself on what a great guy I was. Oh, yeah. And I smugly told myself, oh, well, few people would have gone out of their way as I did to help. And then as I stood there in my judgmental reverie, car drove by a very deep puddle and drenched me from head to toe. Yeah. I had to laugh at my self-aggrandizement, and I actually said aloud, "Well, thank you, God. I needed that. I needed that reminder." So enough of that negativity. Let's talk about ways that selfless service informs and guides our choices going forward. So, first of all, a successful outcome from your effort makes it more likely for you to choose to serve again. Sounds reasonable. But even an unsuccessful outcome can provide valuable information. All right. So the next time you're considering an opportunity to serve, whether it's the same type of task or something different, if we choose to explore our experience, our actions, and our reactions honestly and with the desire to learn, we now have greater information going forward. And we can be of service in a far more effective way. Being of service can open us up to building relationships and even building communities that we might not have considered before. Do you live in a neighborhood where you don't know your neighbors? Have you considered that just a small bit of service can connect you in ways? Rather than being, oh, that's the person that lives down the block, it's, oh, yeah, that's the person that did such and such. That's the person that offered this. That's the person. I mean, you get the idea that people get to know who you are and they get to know what you're about. Okay? So, tremendous benefit to be of service. Being of service can help us develop a more open and outgoing and inclusive perspective. We speak of being an ally, whether we're talking about being an ally to people in terms of culture or gender identity or race, whatever it might be. When you are of service, you get to understand, you get to really see from a different perspective what life is like. So being of service can actually help raise one's awareness of issues regarding ethics, ecology, cultural bias, societal bias. There are many, many more, all of which can lead to a greater sense of involvement and ownership and subsequent relevant actions to work towards a more equitable world. We speak of a world that works for everyone. Well, let's do that. All right? Let's do that. Another way being of service can be of real benefit. It's often an antidote to loneliness. It's an odd but very, very common occurrence that many times when we feel most lonely, it's also when we isolate more, which in turn, of course, deepens the feeling of loneliness. Choosing instead to be involved, to be present for another in need, to be connected to another person or a group or a cause or a movement can bring a greater sense of belonging and fulfillment. And it just happens to benefit both the receiver and the giver. One of the things to remember about being of service is that there is not just a reciprocity in that you do for someone and there is this wonderful feeling that comes from it, but there's also the idea that it is energy in flow. Right? There is an exchange, an energetic vibration that is just magnificent. I want to end today's exploration of selfless service with this thought from the woman known as the teacher of teachers, Emma Curtis Hopkins. She said, "If we feel there is a work to do, we may be certain we are the very ones to do it." So if you're questioning, well, how can I be of service? Turn on the news. Listen to the radio. Listen to what's going on in your neighborhood, what's going on in your city, what's going on in your state, in your country, in the world. See the things that you say, that's not right. That's not the way it should be. And then consider, what is mine to do? Okay? Because if we feel there is a work to do, we may be certain that we are the very ones to do it. Well, that's going to do it for today, folks. If there is something about service that you'd like to explore, or you'd like to suggest a topic relating to choice for a future episode, by all means, let me know. You can email me. Let me bring this up here. Get rid of that. You can email me at zodimuro@gmail.com. I'm always interested in hearing your ideas. And as much as I enjoyed spending this time with you today, I also want to encourage you to do something wonderful for yourself and explore ntmedia.org. Give yourself a gift, right? For example, today at 1 p.m. Mountain Time, you can check out Finding the Joy in the Journey with the always delightful Reverend Gina Calvario Kripke. 2 p.m. Mountain Time is the Vibrant Living Hour with the practitioner Ken Ludwig. At 4 p.m. Mountain Time, Rev Brock Ford's Spiritual Toolkit. Okay. All of these magnificent shows. We have over 40 hours of programming each and every week. So if there is anything that you can do to help us spread the joy and the message of New Thought, by all means, go to ntmedia.org/donate and help us bring this goodness to the widest possible audience. It's been an absolute delight spending this time with you. Choose well, choose wisely. Namaste.
Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Muro.